Do you attract girls? New. Scientists have isolated and synthesized a natural female attractant, androstenone pheromone. Controlled experiments show it attracts women and have been widely reported in the press. It really does work. The most dramatic instances have occurred when wearing it at discos. Girls just drift towards me and start flirting. I knew Contact 18 wasn't a gimmick when one of the girls at work, quite out of character, seduced me when we were in the office alone. Advertisement there. In the March 1993 issue of Autocar and Motor, as it was called then. It was called Autocar. I'm going to put up a full picture of the ad now. If you want to pause, you can have a read of it. Times have changed. Yes, March 1993 issue of Autocar. Here's the cover for you. The brand new Ford Mondeo. Believe it is true. The reason I picked this up, I bought it on eBay. Yes, I am that sad. How much was it originally? Lira. Oh, £1.25. Apologies, I paid way over that, inflation and all. But the reason I picked this up, if anyone listens to the Drive Nation podcast, if you don't, you really should. Drive Nation is it's an Instagram magazine, as they call it, car magazine. It's Drive Nation _ Drive Nation. Anyway, I'll put up the icon now. I'll put a link to their Instagram down below. It's Dan Prosser, who is one of the newer guard UK journalists, motoring journalists, and Andrew Frankel, who some describe as the godfather of UK motoring journalism. Chris Harris would have been an understudy of Andrew Frankel. He works for Motorsport and Autocar, and amongst others, he's written several books. Anyway, in the first episode of their podcast, the podcast hasn't been out long. There's only 5 episodes. You'll find it on any of your lovely podcast apps. They drove the brand new Mondeo around Europe for 12,000 miles in a week. And the original plan, according to the podcast, was they were going to do 10,000 miles in it in a week. But they got near the end and they had time to spare. So Steve Sutcliffe, again another motoring journalist who's still going strong, one of the old guard, he decided let's go for 12,000, because 12,000 miles was the mileage that Autocar reckoned an average user would do in a year back then. In the podcast, he says there was 3 drivers in the car at any one time, because they would have had to have done that for safety grounds. But Andrew Frankel says in the podcast that there really was only 2 doing stints. I think he said the average miles per hour that they hit was 98 to pull it off, which they did. It's a good read. If anyone wants some screenshots of the story, I'll put it through. Yeah, interesting old mag. The new Peugeot 306. Just like, so the new Mondeo. This concept, which I've never seen before, the BMW Z13. Interesting thing. But anyway, if anyone wants to know more about that, they can get in touch with me. Car news, still pretty slow thanks to the old Rona. Couple more cars seen spotted around the Nürburgring. The GT3 Touring, which is essentially just a GT3 with no rear wing and a few other little bits, but it's the short version. What else was there seen there? Oh, the new Audi RS3, which will be evolution rather than revolution, I assume. The new A3 looks pretty cool. Some of the surfacing they have on it is very nice, so that should translate to the wide body of an RS3 quite well. And it looks like it's still going to have the 5-cylinder engine, which is just downright beautiful. Ford have confirmed they're going to kill the Focus RS, which was rumoured, and so we're not surprised by that. Oh, Hyundai, they sell the Veloster. If you remember the Veloster is a Hyundai coupe. Well, I say coupe, it's got 2 doors on one side and 1 door on the other, which only really works in left-hand drive countries, because the doors are kind of on the wrong side in right-hand drive markets. But they sell a Veloster N I know they sell it in the US, probably I'm assuming Korea as well, and other markets. They don't sell it in right-hand drive, but it's pretty much similar to the i30N. Shares most of the same platform. But they've released that with a DCT, dual clutch gearbox. So we can imagine that that's going to come into the i30 soon enough. If that's successful, that's another reason for people not to build manuals. Hopefully they still continue to do that. Gerard & Co., who's a big auction house in the UK, Max Gerardo, he's a very charismatic man who owns it. They have a Ferrari 250 GTE, which is a beautiful car in itself, 60s Ferrari Grand Tour. But it's a police car, an actual police car that they used in Rome for several years. I think there was two of them. One was crashed, unfortunately, but the other one that's for sale is I think was in service for 8 years. That'd be a cool thing to own. Yeah, that's really much it. There hasn't been a whole lot going on in the world of the car. Oh, Koenigsegg put out some renders of a possible concept, a 3-cylinder hypercar. They reckon they could make a hypercar that'll have a 2-litre 3-cylinder engine and weigh 700 kilos and have 700 brake horsepower. So it'll be 700 brake horsepower per tonne. The renders are actually by a design student who did it as part of his dissertation. I'll throw up some pictures of that there. Seems far-fetched, but if anyone can do it, it's Koenigsegg. Yeah, legends. What else is there? Oh yeah, Porsche now offer infotainment systems for classic Porsches, obviously, from the 996 backwards. The 996 one is a double DIN touchscreen, has all the bells and whistles on it, and then you can get a smaller single DIN one for much classic ones. It looks like a classic radio, has a small little screen on it. Quite cool. They're expensive. They're about $2,000. But there you go. If you own a Porsche, $2,000 probably isn't a big deal to you. Yeah, so it's basically the bones of a car news. They're saying it's been pretty slow. Yeah. Oh, speaking of Steve Sutcliffe, I mentioned a while ago. Steve Sutcliffe, he used to write for Autocar. He's written for Evo, Auto Express. You'll know him to see. He's a man of great car control. He's done a bit of racing in his day. And there's a great video. I'll see if I can actually put the video in here now. If not, I'll put the link in the description. But back in what year did Pizzonia drive for Jaguar? I think in 2003, possibly 2004. Antonio Pizzonia, a Brazilian racing driver, he was driving for Jaguar, and so the launch of the S-Type, or whatever the big quick one was, the 5-litre supercharged job, I think it's the S-Type R, and we're at Silverstone, I think it is. Pizzonia's driving, Sutcliffe is in the passenger seat, and Pizzonia, being an F1 driver, giving it the welly. They come to quite a sharp corner. I'm not even sure if it is Silverstone, but anyway, they come to a very sharp bend. And Sutcliffe, being the helmsman that he is, before they even go off the road, he's like, we're off here. And then they roll the car quite dramatically. It's quite an interesting video, because thankfully neither of them are injured. And hats off to the gentleman that is Steve. He, as soon as the car lands, before he does anything else, he checks that Antonio is okay. Legend. It's a bit of a dramatic video, a bit scary at the time, I'd imagine, but I'm sure they can look back on it now and go, Jesus, that was pretty...
No way, we're all on. Whoa. You alright, man? Yeah. Are you alright, man?
Keeping the trend of my model cars, it's the return of another manufacturer this week, but I've gone motorsport. I've gone Formula 1. We have the Ferrari F 2002. This is obviously the Schumacher one. Who else? It's still in its box and on its stand. Now the box is open. So I would have been 2002. So when the model came out, I would have been, 16? It's old enough, actually. But yeah, I did still open boxes. I know they're worth more unopened, but how much more, and am I ever going to sell these? No, I'm not. So the F 2002, so visually, was the first year that Vodafone sponsored Ferrari. One of the most successful Formula 1 cars ever made. It entered 19 races and it won 15 of them. 11 of them were Schumacher, or 12 actually technically were Schumacher. 11 in one season, which is a record for one season, I believe, still, if I'm not mistaken. Vettel might have beaten that, or maybe at least equalled it, but 11 wins in a 19 race season. Barrichello took up the other 4 wins. It was an absolutely dominant car. They designed a revolutionary lightweight, super small gearbox for it. The engine was super compact. So it was slightly down on horsepower to say the likes of the BMW and the Williams and the Mercedes and the McLaren at the time, but it was incredibly lightweight. 600 kilos. 600 kilos in a 700 to 800 brake horsepower V10, a V10 that screamed all the way to 19,000 RPM. So that helped. Well, this was a generation where Formula 1 cars had traction control, and also Bridgestone worked very closely with Ferrari at the time, so the tyres were almost seen as bespoke. So it didn't start the season. They started off the season with the previous year's car, the F2001, although slightly modified. And they actually won some of the races with the old car, and then they brought this in at the 3rd race in Brazil. And then they continued on into the following season. It was used in the first 4 races, didn't do great, but Schumacher won the last race it was entered in Imola. The only race it didn't win, so it was only brought in the 3rd round. The only race it didn't win that it entered that season, the 2000 season, was the Monaco Grand Prix, because Schumacher didn't get pole. He was only 3rd because he had an eye infection. Surprisingly, either racing driver excuse or true. He only qualified 3rd, and Paulo Montoya was 1st and Coulthard was 2nd, but Coulthard actually took the lead at the start and he managed to hold on to the win. But other than that, it was a Ferrari dominated season. What a car. A thing of beauty as well. I think it's just there's not too much and there's just enough. The F2002. And Schumacher won the season, I think, with 5 rounds to go, maybe more. He won it in France, the 11th round, so 8 races to go. I know we say Mercedes dominate these days, but that was something else. So that's basically all I have to say today. There's not a whole lot going on in the world. Thanks for watching again. If you have been watching, I'm probably going to keep these coming. I'm sure I'm going to start running out of things to talk about, as you can probably see from this week's episode, which was pretty dry. If you're watching, thanks. It's keeping me occupied. And I hope you're all keeping safe and well. I'll talk to you again soon.